Kevin오록 is an Irish priest who has a love for Korean literature. In the 1960s, Kevin오록 came to Korea as a Catholic priest. Drawn to the Korean language, he studied Korean literature at the Graduate School of Yonsei University. Since then, he has steadily translated Korean novels and poems. He received the Korean National Literature Prize in 1989 for his translation, Tilting the Jar, Spilling the Moon, and the Daesan Literary Award in 2017 for his translation of the book of Korean poetry, CHOSON DYNASTY. He has translated Korean literature for over 50 years. How did he become interested in Korean literature? We shall find out today. Translation is considered a recreation. It recreates literary works that either enhance or mar the artistic effect of the original works. Today's guest has translated over 2,000 works of Korean literature into English and has significantly contributed to introducing them to global literary circles. Today's guest is Professor Kevin오록, Professor Emeritus of English Literature at Yonsei University, who has spent over 50 years here in Korea studying, teaching, and promoting Korean literature. Hello and welcome to Heart, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us
Hello,
today.
Jennifer. Nice to be here.
Yes, wonderful to have you here with us. So, as I've mentioned, you've been in Korea for over 50 years. To be exact, how many years?
I think it's 55. I came in 1964, and we're now in 19, I think. So,
yes.
As we say in Ireland, put down the naught and carry one, and 55 comes out.
Exactly. Wow, 55 years, that's a very long time.
It's a long time, yes.
So you came to Korea in 1964.
64, right.
Well, what brought you here in 1964?
Well, I was sent by the Columban Fathers. I got a small piece of paper the size of a large stamp, and it said, Seoul, October 1, good luck.
And that was it?
And that was it. No consultation, no nothing. That was it. And I was delighted to come.
Mm-hmm. So at that time, you were delighted to come.
Right.
What would have happened if you came to Korea and discovered that you weren't comfortable here, you didn't like it here? Could you have gone back?
You could. You could appeal to the powers that be, and they would give you a new assignment. But normally, the assignment was for life.
Oh, wow. And here you are.
And here I am.
55 years later.
And still struggling along.
But I mean, obviously you enjoy life here in Korea. Just quickly, I just want to ask you what you like most about Korea.
I just like being here. I grew up with the city.
Yes.
When I got here, Gangnam was paddy fields.
Aha.
And I've never learned to relate to Gangnam as part of Seoul.
Yes.
The northern side of the town, Gangbuk, that was sold to us in the 60s. And I've always loved it here. And the people were very friendly, very nice, very considerate, and were very kind to foreigners. And they continue to be so.
You've just mentioned the Gangnam area, Gangnam Station area. Of course, I would assume that many of our viewers that are watching from abroad are familiar with that area, or at least that name, because of that, very popular Gangnam style song as well. But it sure was different when you first came to Korea in the 60s. Now, you are known to be the first foreigner to have received a PhD in Korean literature from a Korean university, and this was in the 80s.
In the 80s,
In the
right.
80s. And, well, it's no exaggeration to say that you have translated so many Korean literary works published in English. And I want to...
Well, the numbers are are a little bit confusing. I started with short stories, but I moved into poetry. But I have done
Yes, you have.
a lot of stuff, and I have probably done the weight of 1,000 shijo, several hundred hanshi, which are Hanmun, Chinese poems written by Korean poets. And then I've done all the hyanga, the koryo-kayo, the lot of the kasa, and then a lot of modern Korean poetry up to about 2000. When the agent era came in, I said, that's it, I refuse to work through agents. So they just complicated life enormously.
And when was this, when the agents started to come in?
Around about the turn of the century, the
I see.
millennium, round about then. But literature became business. When we started here, literature was fun, and it was very much missionary avocation. When I started off in Yonsei, I went into Yonsei in 1968, and then I decided that if you're going to spend your life here, then you really ought to achieve some sort of fluency in Korean.
Yes.
And the easiest way to do that was to go into college. So I went into the graduate school in the Korean language department in Yonsei in '68. And I was the only foreigner on campus. And it was all a little bit strange. But I studied there under some very famous Korean men. Pang Mo-wol was teaching poetry there at the time. Pak Tu-jin was teaching poetry there at the time, depending on how much trouble he was in with the powers that be, whether he was at the moment outside campus or he was actually on campus. So they would say, you know, why don't you translate this and why don't you translate that? And I gradually got into the whole field of translation.
Right. I think I also, there was an interview that you did and you mentioned something about how there is always that fight against, you know, the possibilities or the probabilities of I guess, producing something different from the original work. Is that when it comes to poetry or all types of literary works?
It's true of everything. Now, we have a translation culture in Korea today which is centered on Korean translators. And they would accuse most foreign translators of being inaccurate, making mistakes in the Korean, and that what we do is we turn out versions of what the original story is. Now, some Italian guy years ago said that all translation is a traitorous act anyway. So I believe that the translator always imposes some of himself in the translated work, and especially so in poetry. Otherwise, you won't come up with a poem.
That's true, yes.
See, if you're doing something by So-wol, for instance, Kim So-wol, or doesn't matter, Shijo, Hanshi, whatever, unless the translation is a poem in English, you've missed the whole point of the exercise.
Right.
So you can come along and say, well, he doesn't really translate. What he does is he does versions of the original, and I think that's very unfair, but I'm a bit prejudiced. You try your best, and you work towards a poem or a story that works in English.
Yes.
And then there's always the whole language question there. We spent 50 years in the 20th century in Korea, our academics, trying to figure out what exactly Korean poetry was. And they tried everything they could find in the West, iambic meter, all the various meters of English poetry, the French meters. They even did the old classical Roman and Greek meters. And at the end of it, all they could say about Korean poetry was that it was centered on the breath group, the umbo. Now, if you say will the boy in the back seat come up to the front and you say, now that's 3/4 rhythm. I don't think you're making a hugely great discovery, but that's what they did. And to this day, they've never been able to characterize exactly what the nature of the Korean poetry line is. It's totally different from the English line. And in the English line, for instance, the last word in the line, the first word in the line, they have a particular emphasis. That doesn't happen in Korean.
In Korean poetry.
So for aspiring poets, Korean is just a gorgeous language because there are no rules. And every time you sit down to write a poem, you can make up your own rules, and you can make up completely different rules tomorrow when you want to write another poem. So you start off as a tabula rasa, blank page, and the whole world is your oyster. I mean, it's a poetry paradise, this.
Right. I think poetry, not only poetry, but I mean, it's tricky when you're moving from one language to another, trying to convey that message.
Right.
But of course, if you were to translate word by word, that message is not going to be delivered. So I would have to agree with you on the part where, a different story is told, or that story is told from a different person's perspective, perhaps.
Right.
As long as you deliver the sentiment or the message that it hopes to deliver. I want to get to the first collection of Korean literary works that you introduced abroad, and it was the 10 Korean short stories.
Right.
You also translated Square, The Square,
right.
by Choi In-hun, and also Our Twisted Hero,
Right.
well known for this, 우리들의 일그러진 영웅 by
Yeah.
이문열, novels that represent the phases of Korean society, a particular phase in, of Korea's modern history. Why had you chosen these particular novels?
Well, I chose Choi In-hun's Kwangjang, The Square, because when I got here, it was an iconic story, and it presented the dilemma of POWs after the war. Would they go north, would they go south, or would they pick a neutral country? And it was quite iconic at the time, and everybody was reading it. And I decided that it would be a good work to translate. Our Twisted Hero was a slightly different case. We were getting ready for the Olympics in '88, and I translated Our Twisted Hero with a view to introducing it in the Olympic year. And I also did a book of poems for the Olympics, and it was this one here, Tilting the Jar, Spilling the Moon. It tells the story of the monk who is so engrossed in this beautiful moon, he wants to bring it with him back to his temple.
Could we pick the book up and take a quick look at it?
So he fills the jar in the stream with the moon in it, and he goes back to the temple, and when he empties the jar, unfortunately, the moon falls out as well. So his best endeavours come to naught. But it's a lovely poem. And in this book, I introduced the people that I thought were best in Korean literature. Jung Chul, Yoon Sun-do, and then a section of anonymous Shijo, and then for the modern part, So Jung-ju. And for me, and to this day, So Jung-ju is the premier modern Korean poet. He's just in a class of his own. Right. Wonderful. So through particularly So Jung-ju, I began to go back through, first of all, through Shijo, because they were short and easy to handle. And then the further back I went, I ended up in Koryo and Shilla, and I discovered that the greatest Korean poetry that we have, and that includes today, it was written in Koryo. The Koryo monk Haeshim has a wonderful poem called Small Lotus Pond. And it says, no wind, no wave, yet a hugely variegated world opens before my eyes. No need for a lot of words. To look is to see. Now that's the essence of Zen. It's also the essence of the poetry business.
Right. Now, the works that the books that you've brought with us in this, they are your works.
Yeah.
They're your way of expressing, your thoughts and these feelings, sentiments. I was hoping if you could maybe introduce to us your works, and if there is a passage or a few passages you might want to share with our viewers.
I wanted to read myself one of my favorite
Yes.
koryokayo, which is
please.
called kashiri.
Kashiri.
Kashiri. And kashiri brings every Korean I've ever known wobbles at the knees. They begin to disintegrate just at the word kashiri, kashiri, kashiri. And I thought it went rather nicely into English. Now, again, it's a love poem. And the lady is wondering what she's going to do. She has a problem. Her man wants to go away for a while. And she says to herself, now, I can stop him. But if I do, he'll be so resentful that maybe he'll go anyway and never come back.
Right.
So the smart thing to do, and you will know, Jennifer, that Korean ladies are always very smart,
Let him go.
is let him go,
Let him go.
and say, come back, love, as soon as you can. And it's kashiri, must you go, must you go, must you leave me so? Ah, chung-jul-ga, the times are good now. How can you leave with a trite fare thee well? Ah, chung-jul-ga, the times are good now. I should stop you, I know, but you'd resent it so you'd never return. Ah, chung-jul-ga, the times are good now. So go, my brooding love, go, but come right home. Ah, chung-jul-ga, the times are good now. The chung-jul-ga is a meaningless rhyming syllable that goes in the middle.
Wow. That just brought me to tears.
Oh,
Really? Oh, wow.
yeah.
I could just, sense I could feel, I don't know, her feeling of not
But I'm
wanting to let
glad
him
that
go.
it
But
has that
yes.
effect on you.
And you said this was your favorite. Why is this
I've
your
always
favorite?
loved it because it's in Korea, kashiri is a kind of a national anthem. But I used to often ask students, what's it about? Nobody could ever tell me that it was about a girl being wise in giving her man a certain amount of leeway and saying, go, but come right home.
Yes, we'd like to take a short break right now. Professor O'Rourke's dedication has laid a foundation for Korean literature to receive attention globally. Now, here is a peek at Professor O'Rourke's workspace, where he has spent years translating.
Professor O'Rourke's place in Dongdaemun-gu, Seoul is the birthplace of his numerous translations. His past translation works are all stored on his computer.
This is my study. I live here with my computer. I translate here. And what I do is what I want to do and what gives me joy. So mostly I'm working at the moment in Hanshi.
A number of books written about different times and regions are also on his bookshelves. The books he translated can also be found in his workspace. What does it mean for him to translate Korean texts imbued with Korean sentiment into English?
And here we are to talk more about your translation work. Of course, there are works that are easier to translate. Some are nearly impossible even for Koreans. And you, as a non-Korean, actually, you spent a considerable amount of time translating Yoon Sun-do's stanza Shijo. It's called The Fisherman's Calendar, 어부사시사. So please tell us about this.
Well, I love the way that you put that. You know, you spent a considerable time. What I did was I was in front of a wastepaper basket,
Uh-huh.
and I'd draft a stanza, boom, another.
Oh my.
And that went on and on and on. And I couldn't see any way out of the forest. And it suddenly occurred to me that in the fisherman's calendar, that a lot of Yun Sun Do's presentation was in the form of concepts. And I suddenly started seeing the fish in the fishing hole, and seeing the tide coming in the morning and going out in the evening, seeing the change in the light throughout the poem. And I made an awful lot of the images that I thought were conceptual into very specific images. So now I have the fish jumping in the hole right in front of the boat. And suddenly it all came to life, and suddenly I was able to do it.
It's
That was,
amazing.
it was, I don't know how long it took, but it certainly took several years.
What about, I mean, it took you 10 years to, translate, come up with a, satisfying translation version of works by Kim Sa-kat.
Yeah.
I mean, he uses a lot of satire in humor. That's why
Yeah.
it's, very difficult to translate his
That-
works.
That's not the problem with
Oh, it's
Kim
not.
Sa-kat. First thing about Kim Sa-kat is that every Korean knows his name,
Yes.
and everyone knows a story or two about him, usually involved with ladies of some description. There's a poem here called Up on the Roof.
Up on the roof.
Yeah. And what happens is Kim Sa-kat gets up on the roof of the schoolhouse, dislodges a tile, and it falls and smashes on the ground. And the other kids in the class are delighted because Kim Sa-kat is the teacher's pet. And now they have something to report to the teacher that Kim Sa-kat had made this goof. So the teacher gives him the choice of writing a quatrain with the Chinese G for go character 12 times, or take 12 lashes of the
Okay.
strap. And of course, Kim Sa-kat picks the quatrain. And the quatrain reads, up I got, the got is the go G character. Up I got right up, I got right up on the roof. I got up there to get a bird, but in the getting up, a tile got loose, got knocked, got smashed. The master got angry, got his whip, and I got beaten. That is not an easy exercise.
No.
So you have to get these 12 gots
Oh.
into it's a lot of fun. Trying
It's
to,
a lot of fun. You say it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it's a lot of sheets in
Oh,
the
yes.
wastepaper basket.
But
But when you do it, you have a terrific sense of accomplishment.
that's amazing.
Now, Kim Sa-kat was a sort of a bridge figure between the old Chinese Hanmun tradition and the newer Hangul tradition of the 20th century. And what he does is, the poem is one thing in Chinese, but if you read it in Hangul, it may be something completely different. And if you want to translate this successfully,
Yes.
you have to cover both options. So this makes it difficult. Reading this up, I got right up, would see any of the writer's skill that has to go in to
I know, it's
produce
amazing,
that. But believe me, it is considerable.
I do hope that we'll see more Korean literature that's translated into English or many other foreign languages. I wish we could see more of them at local bookstores. It's hopefully very soon we'll see more and more of these.
I mean, this is another of our problems here. If you go into any art museum in the States, you'll find that there'll be inevitably some Chinese volumes of poetry, Japanese volumes of poetry, never Korean. You find that when our mayor welcomes some very prominent guest to Seoul, he'll never think of giving him a book of Korean poems
Ah, that would be a great way
or a book of Korean stories. The Korean mind just doesn't function this way. And I remember years ago when I translated Gwangjang, and a very nice Ajamani said to me, I was so proud, she said, I saw your book in a London bookshop.
Oh, wow.
Said it was great. And I said, and did you buy it? No, why would I buy it, she said. I have it at home in Korean. Completely deflated. She had missed the point of the exercise. So a lot of the time I think we shoot ourselves in the foot here when it comes to selling Korea abroad.
Yes.
You know, we're into K-pop and that's terrific. But when it comes to some of our nicer things, some of our finer poetry, we're very slow to give a book to an American friend or a French friend or whatever. Why? I don't know. We do it all the time in Ireland.
I should do that too.
Well,
Yes, we all should start doing that. Professor O'Rourke, I do want to say thank you so much for joining us today. This was such a touching, should I say touching? Yeah, I was moved so many times throughout the show, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
Thank you for having me. 감사합니다.
Now, translation, as we talked about today, is no easy job, but as Professor O'Rourke has mentioned, it's not just about knowing a language. It's not just about understanding a country's culture or history. There's much more to it. And I was able to feel Professor O'Rourke's passion, his love for poetry, and the work that he does. And I wish him the best with his future endeavors. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please join us again next time.